The Redbook says 8 to 10. I think I went with the 6 to 8, but anyways. Hey everyone, it's Jo. I'm the Kosher Ninja, and we've been talking about my adventure last year hiking on the Shvil Israel, or Israel National Trail. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you've stopped by, and while you're here, please don't forget to check out my videos from the Shvil and to subscribe and ring the notification bell down there to get notified when I post new videos. But right now, we're going to talk some more about planning for the Shvil and how to use the Redbook. It's spring, it's finally sprung, and it's a great time to be planning for the Shvil and for the trails in general. One day we will be allowed to get back on the trails, so until then, it's a great time to daydream. So last time we talked about planning to get lucky and about flexibility and planning enough so that you can let the Shvil itself guide you. Well, what exactly does that mean, and how do you do that? Well, it's going to look different for everyone, but I'll give you some of my thoughts and suggestions, and then you can ramp it up or down from there, depending on your backpacking experience level and style. For starters, I said that everyone should read the preface to the Redbook. So unlike the guide itself, which gives you turn-by-turn directions to the Shvil, the preface is kind of your basic introduction to the Shvil. It gives you a ton of useful information for preparing for the Shvil and for hiking in Israel in general. When I started planning and read the preface, I was a total newbie. I was experienced at car camping at home and at day hikes at home and in Israel, but I'd never done an overnight backpacking trip at home at all, let alone in Israel. I had watched a bunch of YouTube videos about backpacking and thru-hiking, and I thought I knew enough to be able to evaluate the advice in the preface. Just no. So for you beginners like I was, you should know that despite the fact that sometimes the Redbook feels like it is written for a general audience, it actually was written with experienced backpackers in mind. For you experienced backpackers, it might sometimes feel a little basic. So I've been in touch with the writers, and the new edition which just came out, it's the 4th edition, it takes this into consideration and is a little bit more aware of both types of hikers. But just keep that in mind. Either way, rookies and pros alike should not let the preface lead you into underestimating the Shvil. I had several experienced backpackers tell me along the way that the Shvil is probably one of the most difficult trails in the world. Now, maybe they were just trying to make me feel a little bit better, but I have no doubt that there's some truth to what they were saying. So don't let the Shvil scare you off, but definitely respect the Shvil and it will reward you. Now let's talk about the guide and your actual plan. Some sources say that the Shvil takes about 6 to 8 weeks to complete, but the Redbook says 8 to 10. Judy and John Pex did the Shvil in their 50s a few years ago, and they wrote a book about their experience. They did it in, I think it was 42 days. Now, the Shvil was shorter then, and they were locals, experienced with the climate, and with hiking in Israel, they're experienced backpackers, and they also weren't so concerned about seeing the sights along the way. So I would definitely go with the Redbook on this one. Unless you're just trying to do the Shvil to get another trail under your belt, I wouldn't race to get from point A to point B. And even if you are trying to get another notch on your hiking belt, come on guys! You're walking through Israel, of all places. I said last time that as you're making your plan, you should keep your goal in mind. What does success look like to you? If you're trying to set a speed record or just get another notch on your hiking belt, then you probably know what you're doing and you already have a detailed plan. Or not. But for the rest of us, I would say make a general outline. Start with a Redbook itinerary, but don't be afraid to modify it and make it your own. The Redbook breaks the Shvil down into 51 hiking days. That is including the new Dead Sea section, but not including any rest days or days that you might want to spend getting to know a place better or seeing the sights. So the tourist days are going to be very individual for everyone, but the rest days, it's recommended that you take one rest day for about every 6 days of hiking. I, as a newbie, had planned to go with the recommended 6 days for one rest day, but with some of my physical challenges and some of the other challenges that I met along the way, I found that about 4 or 5 hiking days for every rest day worked very well for me. So in the desert, you have less flexibility, but as a general rule, that worked for me. So as a result, the Shvil is going to take you about 60 days, not including tourist days. So if you're a foreigner and you're booking your flights, keep that in mind, and I would really highly recommend that you max out your tourist visa time of 3 months. And just so that you have the flexibility to enjoy your time and deal with any challenges that might come up along the way, and also that you can see the sights, especially if it's your first time in Israel. So now you have sort of a basic outline mapping out each hiking day. I guarantee you this is going to change. For example, you'll probably find very quickly that you may be a couple of days behind. And this is okay, because by now you've taken my advice and you've built in some flexibility in your plan. You have your outline. Now go ahead and do your research and find out what interesting sites might be along or near the Shvil on each of those days. Study the guide and the maps and take out those Let's Go guides and Frommer's guides that we talked about last time. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you to Google attractions in Israel. Plan to include sites or activities that are interesting or meaningful to you. For example, Aryeh Green, who also wrote a book about his experience, he made it his goal to visit every winery along the route and to take a dip in every spring that he came across. So what's interesting to you? Research those sites and those activities and include them in your plans so that you don't miss them while you're out there. They're going to give you a framework for your Shvil and help make it your own. And they'll also give you motivation for those days when you just don't feel so great. You're very fortunate. When I started planning my Shvil about 3 years ago now, there were no YouTube videos to help me understand what each day would entail. There were a couple of 5-minute highlight reels, but nothing to really give me a sense for sort of the daily Shvil and what it entailed. That was one of the reasons why I decided to make my videos available to you guys. by the time I got out there, Sarah Duma had finished her desert section and had day-by-day videos of her experience, which was really helpful. Now, of course, you also have my videos, which did not turn out to be the comprehensive guide to the Shvil that I had intended. They're more of a sort of personal journal, but they'll give you a very good picture of what it's like to be out there as a beginner, like I was. Since I've been back, Berend and Ida have also finished their desert section before the coronavirus lockdown kicked them off the Shvil. So their videos are really great for sort of getting a feel for the terrain in the desert section. So now you have your plan. Go ahead, read the guide, but what you really want to do right now is take the guide and the maps for the first few days, I'd say 7 or 8 days maybe, and you want to really study those days in depth. You want to know where your water sources are, where your resupply points are, and you're going to actually be looking for, guess what? Options. I'll give you a couple of ideas for starting from the north, because that's what I did, and because it's easier to find options actually when you start from the north. And there are a couple things you can do when you're starting from the desert. We'll talk about that as well. Before I do that, I should mention that the hiker room in Baram was started in large part because they found that a lot of people were bailing out after the third day, and they really wanted to encourage them to stick with it. So I want to emphasize again, do not feel pressured to strictly follow the Redbook, especially in those first few days. I've said it over and over again that even the pros like Dixie and Darwin don't start out with 30-mile days. They start out each trail with 8 or 10-mile days or whatever works for them, because they've figured out the hard way that if they don't do that, then they get injured right off the bat. So listen to your body. Okay, back to the Redbook. So you're ready to hit the Shvil, but you're not in peak shape because you haven't had as much time to practice and train as you wanted to, or maybe you are in peak shape, but you're really worried about the climate, and you should be. So you want to start easy. What do? Well, if you've studied the first 7 or 8 days, then you know that you don't have to get all the way from Dan to thru-hike on the first day, but you could call on a trail angel in Mayan Baruch, and suddenly you have options. Or maybe you've heard rumors that despite the Redbook saying that starting from the north is easier, the second day from thru-hike to Metzudat Koach is one of the hardest on the Shvil. Well, those rumors are right. It absolutely is. But you've studied the guide and the maps, and you're not quite sure what to do because there's a lot of nature reserves in the area. You're not sure where to pitch your tent, and you don't know what to do. Well, there are some places that you could pitch your tent, but by now you've also learned that about halfway through that second day, there's a couple of lookout points and a couple of back roads that go near or across the Shvil. Any one of these might have some traffic that you could catch a tramp back into town to a hostel or a trail angel. Getting back to the Shvil in the morning might be early in the morning, might be a bit more of a challenge, but there's always a cab. And now at least you have options. Starting from the south, you have fewer options, like we've said before, because you have to sleep in the designated night camps, so you don't have the same flexibility. Having said that, day 2 is listed in the Redbook as Yehoram Night Camp to Rahametek Night Camp, which is 23 kilometers of strenuous up and down in the desert on your second day. So there's actually another night camp about halfway at Shechoret, and I highly, strongly recommend that you break that second day into 2. So instead of going Eilat to Yehoram, Yehoram to Rahametek, you're going to hike the first day from Eilat to Yehoram Night Camp, then the second day from Yehoram Night Camp to Shechoret Night Camp, and then the third day from Shechoret Night Camp to Rahametek Night Camp. Take it from me, you're going to enjoy your hike a whole lot better. Now, there's also a couple of other places along the desert stretch where there's a sort of less well-known night camp, or it's not sort of listed as the official break spot in the Redbook, but the Redbook does mention the alternative night camps, and they're really useful for breaking up some of those sections if you need to. And you should just remember that if you do plan to use one of those night camps, make sure that your water provider services those night camps. And if not, make sure to have an alternate provider or a different plan for getting your water source for those days. So by planning a general outline but not locking it in too tight, you'll be able to adjust as necessary, and you won't have to push through a difficult day. You'll also be able to adjust to any unexpected changes along the Shvil without having them mess up your plan too much. And by the end of 7 or 8 days, you're going to be out there figuring it out as you go, like a pro. Are you planning to hike the Shvil Israel? Did this video help you plan, or do you still have questions? Tell me about it in the comments section down below. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe and ring the notification bell and share this video with your friends. If you've hiked the Shvil Israel and have suggestions or comments that might help those who are planning, please leave those as well in the comments down below, and I'd just love to hear from you. I'm so excited that we get to share our journeys and experiences in this way, and I can't wait to see you again next time. Until then, thanks for watching, and shalom,